We are back at it with hopefully the rest of this tier list of first dates with Courtney Ryan.
I think that can be really cute, but I would really strongly recommend waiting until a few dates in for this. So again, I'm going to put inviting a woman to your house for a first date in F tier. And if you're a woman watching who is going over to a man's house on a first...
Wrong. It's clearly A tier. Like I said, it can backfire, but it usually won't. You have to have your house clean, have some decorations, have a bit of your personality on display, and it will probably go great, as there's so many things to connect to. Literally, I've had people connect to the most random things at my house, and instantly it endears them to me tremendously.
First date that you just met, I don't know about that. I wouldn't recommend that. All I know is it's going in the F tier for me. Next up here we have hiking, which would again be a safety thing that I'd be considering. I would never go on a hike with a man that I'm meeting for the first time in the middle of nowhere, in the woods, with perhaps no cell phone service. So I'm going to put hiking in D tier. I know some of you will say, well, me and this girl are really into outdoor things. If you go somewhere in an outdoor setting, I would just recommend going somewhere where there's other people around you.
Yeah. Because you can like hike to a lake or somewhere. I feel like if someone was going to commit a crime against you, whether it be a man or a woman, and you say you're into hiking, they're going to say, yeah, I'm into hiking too. What are the odds? Let's go on a hiking date.
And not necessarily somewhere that's going to be so secluded, where it's just going to be the two of you totally secluded in the middle of the woods. I know I said that a first date should just be the two of you to get to know each other, but again, I think going in a public setting where there's other people around you can just make a woman feel a little bit more at ease and comfortable and safe on a first date, which is not necessarily something that a man has to think about on a first date as much as a woman does. Men should absolutely consider their safety as well. You never know who you're talking to, especially if you're meeting someone online, but I would strongly recommend going somewhere public. There are so many things, so many fun outdoor activities you can do that would still be in a public setting that would make a woman feel more safe than a hike in the woods, secluded with a man she just met. So, D tier. I've also got to be really honest with you, I am not a hike type of girl. I don't really enjoy going for hikes. I like going for runs outside with my husband. That's something we enjoy doing together, but a hike, really not my thing. But that's not why I'm putting it in D. I'm removing my personal bias from it, and I'm just thinking of it from a safety element and offering a woman's perspective on safety that maybe you guys have not considered. So regardless of my personal opinion on hiking, which, gotta be honest, don't love it, still going into D for me. Honestly, could also be F, but we're gonna be generous. The next one here is a group date or a friend gathering. My mindset around this one is very similar to the family type date, family gathering date. I really think a first date best option should just be you guys getting to know each other. I think sometimes if you're on a double date or you're with other people, it can be a little bit more difficult to get to know each other because you're talking to other people as well. I'm sure this could work out for some people just fine.
It kind of depends on how much if you've gone on a double date with these people before, or you've hung out with them in a similar context before, because a kind of double date or group thing can really elevate a date. It does add pressure that you probably don't want on a first date, but it can be effective. Sometimes it can take off certain pressures. Kind of if you're... What I mean by that is it can kind of create a scenario where it's not as stuffy. It removes the pressures that would kind of naturally exist on a first one-on-one date, but it also creates other pressures as there's more uncontrolled variables, especially if you haven't been around with the woman that you're into with your group of friends, and if there's too much unexpected stuff could happen, then that can create some really awkward scenarios. But if you have had that experience and you kind of know how to navigate it, and your friends are good wingmen and wing women, then it can go super well. Basically, it's almost like they riz the woman for you as they like gas you up, and glaze you to her. It can actually work really well in your favor. And, the person you're on a date with can become very endeared to your friends as well, and instantly build a stronger connection with you. That it can work, and it can work in the sense that it's like a date, but you're eliminating the one-on-one aspect, can take away the pressures that some people will feel towards like social awkwardness, because oftentimes it's well established that on a first date, typically the woman is going to talk anywhere from 60% of the time to 80% of the time. Now 80% is a bit much and 60% a bit little, but that's still a pressure that's on a woman on a first date to kind of carry the date, whereas that pressure is relieved when there's other people around, other stuff going on, other people to talk to, room for just, listening to somebody else's story. It can work really well in that way. And it can erase the pressure of it just being a first date, of being on a date at all. And it can also it can kind of give somebody an out, right? Because it's not like an official, it's kind of an unofficial date, really.
Fine, especially if you have a mutual friend. I think if you're meeting through a mutual friend, that can be different. If you're meeting someone online and asking them to meet up with you and your friends, that's a little strange to me. And actually, this is something that happens more often than you would think. I actually had a girlfriend recently tell me that a guy invited her out to hang out with him and his friends. And she was like alone, wanting to hang out with this guy, but he invited her out with his friends, which would just signal to me that he sees you as a friend. I don't know. I don't love this one. I'm going to put this.
Yeah, like if you're going out to a bar with the boys and you bring a date, especially as a first date, that'd be real weird. If you're going to do a group, you want there to be like women in that group. You don't want it to be like too buddy-buddy, too chummy, because it's going to create that kind of environment, which isn't phenomenal. It's a very tricky balance. And also seating. Like, if you're doing a group thing, you often eliminate kind of that preparation that I talked about, kind of knowing where you're going to sit, because if you're sitting as a group, you're usually sitting in a larger tabled section, and who you're sitting like around is more up in the air. You can't control those things unless you're a very assertive person where you're willing to say, all right, me and my date are sitting here and here, you guys are sitting here, here, and here. But maybe your group's not open to that. Maybe you're not assertive enough to be that direct with your friends and this date. You don't want to seem like a jerk. Very hard to navigate. I would only suggest this if you have a group that you're very comfortable with.
This one in D as well.
If you say his name 3 times.
Beetlejuice. Oh God. Don't recommend that movie.
Depending on the situation.
It was a very rushed movie. I feel like they wrote the script in 2 days and then they filmed it that weekend.
Again, maybe if you met through a mutual friend and you were going to go out with that mutual friend and their significant other. But I think first date territory, again, we're talking first date, should just be the two of you. Next on my list is a concert, which...
And I say that as someone who has written a script or two. As like not a professional writer. Literally nothing that I've written I've actually made into anything yet.
Could...
And yes, I'm talking a full movie script.
Be really great. I'm thinking B or C for concert would probably depend on the type of concert that you're going to. Regardless of the concert, though, I think this is way better than a movie because you can talk during it most of the time. You guys would be able to interact a bit more during a concert than you could a movie. Maybe you both really enjoy the artist that you're seeing. If you...
I I kind of agree, but I also disagree for all of the reasons. I'm sure she'll get into it, but the issue of it being too loud, too crowded. Now you're gonna get some stuff like there being people around, that people watching, stuff happening around you to talk about, but overall there's a lot of downsides.
You did dinner before the concert. I think that's great. I would probably put that in B tier. I think a concert paired with something else is really great. You guys can bond over the fact that you really like the artist that you're seeing, and enjoy each other's company during the concert. Just a concert on its own, though, it doesn't really give you the space to talk and get to know each other. So I'm going to put that one in. I'm going to go C, but this one could easily be in B as well, depending on the concert that you're going to and the person that you're going out with. If you pair...
Now, this might be sort of more me specific, but I would rank a movie date. I would put concert in like low F, like below a movie date, because although you can't talk during a movie at all, at least you can talk afterwards, and I would actually have something to talk about. Like even if I was into music to the level where I had some things to say, I feel like you would still be very limited on what you can even talk about the performance you just saw. Whereas a movie, you're gonna have like a lot to talk about potentially. Now a lot of women, they aren't gonna have much to say about a movie. Like you aren't gonna get a whole lot of lengthy conversation about a film, but it is what it is.
Pair the concert with something, I would absolutely put this one in B tier. Okay, next one here, similar to the concert, a little bit different, and that is a comedy show. I think there's some pros and cons to this one. Pros could be you're both laughing. Maybe you have the same sense of humor. You're both excited to see this comedian. I actually just went to a comedy show over the weekend and had a blast. My husband was sitting next to me, and we obviously weren't talking during the show because that's rude, similar to a movie. But we were both laughing the entire time. We have this...
I think this would be... I would place it above a movie, above a concert, but just barely, because typically, I mean, I've only gone to like one comedy show where one person bombed enormously, and I didn't go on a date, but one person like totally bombed. One person was pretty good, and then I think the other person was just mid. So I don't know. I don't really know how this would function. I feel like if someone's like bombing, it depends on the level of comedy show you go to as well. Because there are some where they're huge, they're like a concert, and some that are small. Now, the small ones, if it's kind of like total amateur hour, and someone's bombing, then you'll have the opportunity to talk a little. You can kind of just leave if you want. Like I would feel way less bad if I left like a crappy comedy thing. I feel like it's easier to sneak out than certain other things. Like if you went to a concert and it was pretty small, I mean, I guess that would be easy to sneak out too. I just feel like there's a high likelihood with a comedy show that you would want to leave. So maybe as like a small part of a date, like one of like 3 things you do on the date.
Same sense of humor. So it was just so much fun. I think a comedy show is one of the best things to do with a significant other. On a first date though, this could go south. If this is your first time meeting someone and you don't necessarily know their sense of humor, perhaps before the show you would have talked about the person that you're seeing and maybe you both really like that person. But if it's sort of a wild card and you don't know the comedian that you're seeing, or you're going to a comedy night where there's a ton of different comedians there, maybe this person doesn't have the same sense of humor as you. And
if you were to do this, I would be terrified. Well, I wouldn't be terrified. If it was a woman that was like... if it was a date I was like pumped for, a woman I was building a real strong connection with very quickly, and I really wanted the first date to go well, a comedy show would be terrible. especially even a smaller one, probably especially a smaller one, because some of the people, they're just working on their kind of crowd work with comedy, where they're picking somebody out of the crowd. Basically, they just start roasting somebody in the crowd, asking that person questions, and kind of their whole comedy act is centered around them just like kind of targeting one person in the audience and bouncing off of them. And if that would happen to be you, which there's a high likelihood that would be you if you're like clearly on a first date, if you go on a date to a comedy show, I would say avoid that like the plague. Sit like as far in the back corner as you can so you don't get picked out of the crowd. Definitely nowhere near the front, because that something like that could happen where all of a sudden you're just getting like roasted for a half hour.
And doesn't think anything is funny, and you guys are just sitting there awkwardly. Maybe they're offended. Not the greatest. I don't know who would be offended by a comedy show. Not necessarily someone that I would want to be out on a date with. Again, you're not really talking to each other, similar to a movie. A comedy show paired with something else beforehand would absolutely be probably A tier to me. But if you're just doing the comedy show, I'm going to put it in B, just because I think it can create a more fun, lighthearted atmosphere. Again, I'm really feeling kind of similar about the concert and the comedy show. I could probably move the concert up to B, honestly. I'm gonna move it up for now.
That's wild. That's absurd. I would never in my life go on a first date to a comedy show or a concert. Whereas a movie, I would avoid it like the plague. But if the woman wants to, if say movies comes up in our conversation leading up to the date, and it just makes sense. Say she really likes an actor, and hey, there's an actor like Ryan Gosling's got a movie in the theater right now. There's certain times where like that, where you would want to kind of lead into going on a date to do something that you both want to do, which can be seeing a movie where you both want to see the movie. Now that also could apply to a concert, I suppose, but I don't know. There's just so much crappy variables with a concert. Getting beverages, getting food, all kinds of like weird obstacles, because that just don't exist with the movie theater. With the movie theater, you can get beverages, you can get food. There's washrooms readily available. You're not waiting in lines, really. Now, I mean, there can be a small line for like concessions, but you're comfortable. You're sitting. In a concert, you could be like out in the rain. There's just all kinds of levels of potential awkwardness that can occur that I don't like. I don't like adding all sorts of wild variables to a date.
Because I think they're very similar. I don't think...
Now, granted, I would recommend, if you're going to see a movie, do not see a comedy. Probably just a comedy in general. Avoid. Unless it's very obvious that it's going to be decent, right? But even that's pretty hard to anticipate. I'm trying to think of a comedy recently that clearly was going to be good. Just avoid comedy as a genre. Potentially avoid horror even to an extent, unless it's pretty clearly going to be good, right? Like, go see Terrifier 3. Go see, say, another Evil Dead movie comes out. Go see that. It's going to be good. Every Evil Dead movie is good. But if it's like found footage or has the potential to be a terrible, terrible movie, you probably don't want to go see it, because it can be a very painful experience. Seeing a very unfunny comedy film can be one of the most painful experiences of your life, because you're just stuck. If you're stuck watching it, right? If you're watching it at home, just turn it off. Start watching another movie. But in a movie theater, like, you paid, you're there, you're on a date. You don't want to just leave. And oftentimes, unless like if it's complete dog water, talk to your date. Just start talking to your date. Even if it's crowded, like move where you're sitting to a somewhere that's far away from anyone else watching, and try to get a vibe of whether your date also hates it. Like, maybe even say this movie stinks, because if you can verify with who you're with that this movie stinks, you can either walk out or you can go to the back and make out. Like, do something at least productive, at least something interesting, you know? Make the best of a bad situation. Because I'm telling you, sitting there for like nearly 2 hours in a comedy where like nothing funny, no jokes land, nothing funny's really happening. It's just pathetic attempt after pathetic attempt. Just zero is landing. It's going to be an awful experience. And you don't want your date to like associate that terrible experience with you. But I'm going to cut that off here. This is part 3. See you in part 4.